Welcome to the Nikon Z7ii and Z6ii Complete Camera Guide. My name is John Gringo, and we have a rare 2-for-1 offer here. We're going to be covering both of these cameras in this class. I'm going to be showing you everything on how they work, their operations, the menu systems, and the full control of both of them. Now, it's pretty rare that I would do two cameras in one class, but these cameras are really so very similar in so many ways. There's a different sensor, and that's the big difference that we'll talk more about throughout this class, but the buttons, the controls, the layout of the camera, the menu system are all virtually identical. In fact, I could only find one feature difference between the two cameras other than things related to the sensor, so resolution and ISO, we'll talk about that. But there's one feature missing in the Z6ii, and it's a really minor one I've personally never used in my life, so not really a big deal, but we'll find out about that later on in this class. So, as I say, welcome to the Complete Guide. We've got a full class in store for you. In fact, let me tell you exactly what we're going to be doing in here. I've got a large class planned for this camera. These cameras, I got to change that, yeah. These cameras, and it is kind of designed to be viewed in order from beginning to end, but there's a lot of information you may want to come back to, so feel free to pop around after you've viewed it once to find out more information. Now, we're going to start off with some basic info here just to get people started. We're going to dive into the really important stuff in section 3, exposure, all the tools and controls for getting the best exposure. Equally important is section 4 on focus. Lots of different controls to work with in there. A fun section, I think, is 5 on the drive settings. A lot of different options in there. Then we're going to take a tour around the camera looking at the remaining buttons and dials to figure out what they do. We'll look at the options for the viewfinder and LCD monitor on the back of the camera. And one of the quickest ways of changing a lot of the controls is the I menu, so we'll go through that one. Then we're going to look at all the different settings for movie recording. There's a lot of things that are a little bit different about this camera in that way. Then we'll take a look at all the input, output ports, memory cards, and other plug-in accessories. We'll take a quick tour through some of the lenses and give you some recommendations in that regard. And then the next several sections are going to be going through the menu, tab by tab, item by item, giving you recommendations all along the way. And in the very end, I'll give you my field setup recommendations as to how I would set this camera up for a variety of different types of photography. So all in all, you're going to have a very well-rounded education here on what this camera can do. It doesn't really matter as to what type of photography you're interested in, you're going to have it covered here in this class. Now, a bit of advice on the information as we go through. I will be referring to information that is in the menu items that we're going to get to later on in this class with this menu reference box. Oftentimes I'll say, oh, this button can be reprogrammed to do such and such, and some of you I know are people who like to jump ahead and get that done right away. So if you want to stop the video, follow this little menu reference box to go find that particular feature and make that adjustment. Feel free to do that as you wish. If you don't like to jump ahead, not to worry, we'll eventually come back to that when we get through the menu system, and I'll talk about that feature again and remind you what we talked about earlier. Now, sometimes later on in the class, we'll be talking about a particular feature that was fully explained earlier on in the class. Generally speaking, I try to only fully explain a topic once, generally the first time around. There are exceptions, but generally you can go back and find out more information with that class reference box. All right, now on this particular class, the Z7ii and the Z6ii are the priority of what we're going to be focusing on talking about in this class. Photography is a big world of topics. We could talk about composition and lighting and all sorts of other things, and we're just really concentrating on these particular cameras and what they can do. Even hooking up with flashes and other accessories, laptop computers through tethering, well, there's more than enough to talk about just concentrating on what these cameras can do, so we're going to stay focused on them. I also am a little bit biased. I like to know how to do things manually so that I can repeat them and get consistent results. These cameras do offer some options for kind of automatic artistic results, and I'll explain them. I'll show you examples to them. We're just not going to dwell on them as much as how to get things done yourself. And finally, I don't know how much you know. I know that I have a wide variety of people who take these classes. Some people are just getting into photography for the first time, so I feel like I'd like to give them a little bit of help out. So for some of you more experienced photographers, there might be some review sections in here, little bits of information that you already know. And so this should just keep everyone up to speed with what's going on in the camera. Now, the cameras do come with two instruction manuals. They have a basic info guide that'll get you through kind of a real quick setup, and then they have their full manual, which is their larger one. And these are probably not going to be necessary for most of you after I get done with this class, once you go all the way through the modules here. There is still some detailed specifications, there's some compatibility issues, and some data in there that you may want to reference. And so don't throw them away, you might need them, but generally I'm trying to cover 99% of the uses for 99% of the photographers. Now, just in case you're wondering, the secret model names, they're not really secret, and that's why it's in quotes, is the N1932 and the N1929 for these two cameras. That's just Nikon's in-house model numbers for these. And so you may see that reference somewhere in the manual or on Nikon's website, perchance. For any of you that are new to Nikon, welcome to the family that's been around for quite some time. They started with rangefinder cameras back in 1948. 1959 was a big year because that was the F and the F lens mount, which really started an incredible legacy in cameras, lenses, and so forth. So 86 was important because they introduced their first autofocus lens, and you can stick lenses all the way back from then onto this camera and get autofocus out of it with the right adapter. We'll talk about those more in the lens section. 1999, they brought about their first revolutionary digital camera. I recall this camera, it had was it 2.7, 2.4? Oh, I can't remember right now. I think it was 2.7 megapixels and sold for around $5,000. But it was a well-built camera and it was revolutionary at the time. Now, Nikon started playing around with the mirrorless market in 2011, but it was a very small sensored camera, so it didn't attract the same type of users that we have now going with these full-frame ones. And these were introduced in 2018 with their new Z mount, and their Z6 and 7 were their launch cameras, and these are the refinements of those launch cameras. Now, to understand where the Nikon system sits today, realize that there are 4 different categories of cameras and lenses within the system. So the Z7ii and the Z6ii fit in the full frame mirrorless quadrant of options. They do make a couple of cameras that are cropped frame. Now, Nikon is notoriously known for not fully supporting the cropped frame versions, whether it be in the DSLR or mirrorless category. And so we're still early days into the mirrorless world with Nikon, so we'll see how far they take it for now. But right now they just have a couple of cameras that are more different in style than in substance. So they look to be going for a little bit more of the low-end market with their crop frame mirrorless. Now, a lot of their serious and longtime pros have been using the full-frame DSLRs, just incredibly good cameras, and we're seeing some of those people switch over to mirrorless at this time. Their crop frame DSLRs have had a very strong sales popularity among people. Whenever I go around tourist crowds, I see tons of basic Nikon 3500s and so forth. So they've been very popular. So those are 4 different categories, and the lenses between them are very different. So if you are with the mirrorless crowd, like the Z7ii and 6ii here, you want to be looking for Nikon's Z lenses. And so these are full frame mirrorless lenses. They're perfectly compatible and they're ideally made for this type of camera. Now, Nikon does make, at this time, only a couple of ZDX lenses, and these are designed exclusively for the crop frame cameras. Now, you can technically put them on the camera and shoot pictures, and life is generally fine. The problem is that they don't have full coverage area, and you're going to get a cropped in area. So you ideally don't want to be using those with these cameras. All right, a little bit on the care and handling of this camera. There's always a lot of warnings. I try to boil it down just to a couple of points. It's not a weatherproof camera. It's, depends on what you consider weatherproof. It's not an underwater camera, that we can be sure of. It does have a number of weather seals. It is pretty good in inclement weather, but if it is heavily raining or heavy wet environment, you do want to take some precautions in that regard. Nikon, as well as pretty much all the other manufacturers, are going to tell you non-name brand accessories are not intended for the camera. Well, we're going to put in memory cards and lenses and flash from various manufacturers, and it should be completely fine. I would generally stick with Nikon batteries and power sources because shortchanging that aspect of the camera, not the best idea in my opinion. One goofy warning they have is do not use this camera while walking. I know that I'm already in trouble for that one there, but do be careful, yes. As far as the construction of the camera, it is a well-built camera, magnesium alloy chassis. It should withstand years and years of use. I wouldn't try to drop it, but it can survive quite a bit that you throw at it. The camera does have weather sealing. It's pretty weather sealed. They've got a lot of seals around different parts that move and open and close and so forth. As I say, do be careful though if it's a very wet environment. Now the shutter life, the number of cycles of the shutter firing is one of the ways that we rate how good a camera is. Now, kind of historically speaking, a lot of cameras were considered just kind of standard shutter cycle life of around 50,000. So this is tremendous in that regard. There are some other cameras now that are out there that are generally in this price range that are at 300, 400, and some a little bit higher price that are at 500,000. So it's considered pretty good, but not the best in that regard. But I would say that for most people, it's not likely an issue. It's more one of these theoretical, well, this is what they say about it. Chances are this is the type of camera that could last anyone a good 10 or 15 years if they take care of their equipment. All right, let's get our camera ready, and you can follow along to make sure your camera is ready for the class here. You want to have a charged battery because we're going to be taking some test photos. You'll need a lens on the camera. Now, on the Z6 here, I have a Z lens mounted on the camera, and over here on the Z7 II, I have a older DSLR lens, but I have it on an adapter designed by Nikon, so this can work fully with this. And so either way you work is going to be fine. You're going to be able to access all the features and follow along just as well. Now you will need a memory card in the camera. You don't need to have two. You can either have one or the other or both in there, and we'll talk more about cards a little later on in the class. Go ahead and turn the camera on, as I will right now. Now on the side of the lens, there is a manual focus autofocus switch, and this is a very manual way of going back and forth between manual focus and autofocus. And while I am a big fan of manual focus, and I'll be talking about that in the focus section, for right now we're going to leave it in autofocus and just kind of let the camera handle that chore for us. And then on the top of the camera, we're going to move the camera to the auto mode, not where I normally like to keep it, but we're going to move it there for right now just to make sure that we have kind of a very simple setup. You can see right now there's a little auto mode in the upper left corner. And then what I'm going to do is press halfway down on the shutter release and take a photo. The camera focused, fired a shot. That means my camera's ready. Hopefully yours is as well. Okay, before we dive too far in, let's talk about the differences between the 7 and the 6 version 2 here. The big difference is that it has a different sensor in these two cameras. One's a 45 megapixel sensor, one's a 24. So 24 is considered quite good in my opinion. 45 is kind of, really high end, something that landscape, product photographers, maybe portrait photographers, or anybody who's enlarging their images into large prints might appreciate. But you can still make very large prints with 24 megapixels. So the ISO range, as a result of the different megapixel settings, is also going to be slightly different. The Z7 II is going to drop down to an ISO 64 as its native sensitivity, whereas it's 100 with the Z6 II. So you, in theory, are going to be able to get a little bit better information off the Z7 II because it can drop down to that lower ISO setting. The number of focusing points is different. It's not really a big deal when it comes to the application and how you work with the camera. For good or for bad, the focusing points on the Z7 II are a little bit smaller, and on the Z6 II, they're a little bit bigger, and there could be benefits either way on that one. So it's different. I can't really say that one's better than the other. The max frames per second will be different because the amount of data that the camera is recording is different, and thus the buffer, how many images you can shoot at any one given moment before kind of the whole buffer fills up trying to get images to the memory card. And so the Z6ii will be a little bit better for long bursts, but if you look at that number, I would have no problem shooting with the Z7ii and getting a minimum of 46 shots in a row. That would be fine for most sports situations. The 4K video, the way it achieves 4K video is a little different. It is a little bit better to have an oversampled rather than a line skipping system, so there might be a very subtle image quality difference between the two, where the 6 is actually a little bit better. That one feature difference between the two is there is a crop option that you have on the Z7ii where you can have a 4:5 crop, and it's not part of the options in the Z6, so I guess you get what you pay for. And finally, the battery life is better and worse on both. Depends on exact settings and how you use the camera, viewfinder, LCD, and other settings that are turned on and off. So they're different but equal. So there you go. All right, next up, let's check the firmware, because the firmware is the software that runs all the operations on the camera. And I want to let you know where I am so that when we're going along, you'll understand why my menu looks the way it does, or the features I have are the way they are. And so currently, the 6 and the 7 Mark II are at 1.21. And so let's go ahead and show you where you can find this out. So this is going to be in the setup menu. I'm going to go ahead and hit the menu button here. And over on the left, if you go left, you can go up and down through the different tabs over here. And the wrench is your setup menu. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can just hold it and it'll go a little bit quicker. I think it's the last item on the list. Firmware version right here. You can either press the OK or go to the right. I'll go to the right. And you can see here the C stands for camera. LF would be lens firmware. We're not going to worry about that right now. But the camera firmware is at 1.21. Now, if you have a number lower than this, or you are watching this class in the future, which I know you are, Nikon may come out with new software. And so if you would like to get that new software, what you do is you go to Nikon's website. You can do a little search for Z2 or Z6 firmware. It'll give you some more detailed instructions, but in general, you're going to download some firmware, you're going to put that bit of software on a memory card, put the card in the camera, come right here where we just at in the menu, and it's going to see that new firmware on the memory card and ask you if you would like to update it, and you'll say, yeah, let's do that. It'll take a few minutes to update the firmware, and then you'll have new software running the camera. Now, if it's a really small change, like 1.20 to 1.21, they might have fixed a really small little bug that hardly anyone notices, or a spelling mistake in one of the foreign languages. If it's 1.2 to 1.3, they probably did something more noticeable. And if it ever goes to 2.0, they've probably made some really big changes. And you never know when they're going to do this or what they're going to do. It's whatever they can, it's whatever they need to do to keep up with the rest of the market. And so with these cameras, I would say you should check back with Nikon or one of the websites that follows that information, probably every 6 months to every year, just to make sure that your camera is working with the best available software on the camera. All right, next up, if you have been playing around with your camera like I have, I want to get it back to the factory reset settings, because some of you are taking your cameras right out of the box now. They're so new. And I want to kind of work with this class kind of straight from the beginning. So what I want to do is I want to reset my camera, and you can follow along if you want. If you've already got your camera set up, that's okay. Just keep it the same, and just realize that some of the settings that we go through may be different because you've already customized your camera. But if you do want to reset things, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have to do a number of resets for different sections of the camera. The first one we're going to do is we're going to reset the photo shooting menu, and so all the photo related items in there. And then there's another reset for the movie shooting menu. There's another one for all the custom settings, and finally a third for all the setup. And so these are the 4 different categories that we're going to go ahead and adjust. All right, so let's dive into the menu system here so that we can reset our cameras. back to its factory default settings. So using the tabs on the left, we will come down to the camera, which is your photo shooting menu. We're going to reset photo shooting menu. You can either go OK or right. I'll go right here. I'll go up to the yes and press OK. I'm going to go left and come down to the video camera symbol, come to the right. Reset movie shooting, OK. Up to the yes and OK again. Left to the tabs, down to the pencil, which is our custom setting menu. To the right there, our top item up here is reset custom settings. OK or to the right, and up to yes and hit OK. That's reset. One more to go. Down here at the wrench, the setup menu. Now, you'll notice that it's not at the top of the setup menu. It's at the bottom, and there's a scroll bar that goes down and down and down and down. And the easiest way to go down really far is to go up. So we go up and we do a shortcut to the bottom end of that list, and reset all settings is the second from the bottom item there. We'll go to the right here and up to reset and press OK. Now this is a bigger one here, so we're going to double confirm this by going up to yes, press OK, and it's resetting. Tells us to turn the camera off, which I will do, and then I will turn the camera back on, and voila, our camera is reset back to the factory settings so that we are dealing with a clean slate. All right, so folks, that was your introduction section, and one other thing that you're going to want to know about is that with this class, there is a accompanying PDF that you can print out or view electronically. And in here, I have the entire menu system for the camera, along with recommendations for settings on all of these. Now, this is just kind of an inaugural starter point for my recommendations on the settings. I know all of you are going to do your own thing, and I think that's great because everyone's going to get their own camera set up for their own needs. So I include a couple more pages in here where there is no recommendations. So you can put in your own recommendations, your own notes, and so forth. And so this comes with the class. There's also some of the field settings with some additional setting information in it. And so you're going to want to print that out and have that ready for the second half of this class when we start going through the menu system. All right, folks, there you go. Quick little introduction for this class. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a good one. So take a break and we'll see you back in the next section.